I'll call this meeting to order. It's the regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation and Public Works Committee. I'm Councilmember Reich. I chair this committee, and I'm joined by my colleagues on the committee, including Councilmembers Johnson, Palmisano, Bender, Fletcher, and Gordon. We're a full complement, and we'll proceed with today's agenda, which has 19 items, many of which are on consent. I'll go through the consent items. Any committee member can pull them for further consideration. And after that, we dispense with that. We'll go into the public hearings in order. We'll start with first consent item, item 6 on the agenda, which is the agreement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation for delegated authority on federal aid projects. Item 7 is the contract with Menzel Enterprises Incorporated for towing services. Item 8 is the contract amendment with Barr Engineering for North Region modeling work. Item 9 is the contract amendment with Peoples Electric for additional wiring for LED fixtures in the ABC parking ramps. Item 10 is the contract amendment with Waste Management Incorporated for continued transfer station operation services. Item 11 is the contract amendment with Interstate Improvement Incorporated for concrete pavement rehabilitation. Item 12 is the contract amendment with Zahn Associates for work at the 4th Street reconstruction project. Item 13 is the interagency cooperative agreement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation for construction of traffic signals. Item 14 is the Quarters of Commerce program supported projects. Item 15 is the Oak Park Alley construction project designation, estimates, and setting the public hearing. That public hearing will be set for May 1st, 2018. Item 16 is the application for Hennepin County Bicycle Sidewalk Grant funds. Item 17 is the D-Line Bus Rapid Transit Draft Station Plan, City of Minneapolis comments. Item 18 is the bid for the installation of large diameter cured in-place pipe. And the final item is the bid for the Fridley Lift Station improvements. Does a committee member wish to pull an item for further consideration? Seeing none, I will move all items as submitted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting nay. Those items will be forwarded to full council. We will now go to our public hearings, starting with item 1, which is the 5th Street Southeast Pedestrian Bicycle Bridge, municipal consent and maintenance agreement with the state of Minnesota. Good morning, Director Hutchinson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Don Flom with Transportation Planning and Programming will provide information about this item.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and council members. I have a brief presentation I'd like to give before the public hearing. We're here today to talk about the 5th Street Southeast Pedestrian and Bicycle Bridge, which is in the Marcy Homes neighborhood. I just wanted to go through a couple of facts before we talk about issues. First of all, the bridge is functionally obsolete. For those who've been out there, you know that the bridge is very narrow. There's a lot of vegetation, and that's presented a number of challenges from both a public safety perspective and also from a user perspective. We have over 2,000 users per day that use that bridge today. So the state went and found some federal money to help reconstruct the project. It's a $4 million project that we brought the layout earlier to you in 2017 and got that approved. And since then, MnDOT has hosted a number of visual quality workshops where community members were able to select bridge color, design, that sort of thing. So this was not a typical process. With the visual quality workshops, we were able to give the neighborhood a lot more say in a project like this than normal. And just to give you an understanding of kind of the context of the neighborhood, there's a lot of one-way streets with 4th and University, and 5th X is a one-way street with a reversible bike lane. A number of two-way local streets present some challenges with regard to this bridge, because one of the things that we're going to be doing is turning some two-ways into one-ways to make the bridge possible. So we'll take a look at that in a second here. The bridge layout will allow for emergency vehicles to get up on the bridge, including police vehicles. And that's why we need those extra feet on both sides to allow for a more gentle curve in getting onto the bridge. Also helps with grades and ADA compliance. This is an aerial perspective of the bridge, what it will look like. And another perspective looking at the railing design, which is something the community weighed in on. And so there are two things from a state statute perspective that do trigger what we call municipal consent. One is the fact that we have to take some local roads and turn them from two ways into one ways to allow for the narrowing of the, or to allow for the widening of the bridge, which therefore narrows the roadway. We have to turn those streets into one-ways. And then there's also some right-of-way acquisition on the west side. There's a sliver of public right-of-way that's necessary to make the project happen. So here are some basic cross-sections of what we're talking about. Parking is a premium in this neighborhood. We're suggesting that we keep the parking on both sides, on both the east and the west side of this bridge. And then here's the sliver of property that's required. So with that said, questions?
Any questions for this project? See none. We will then open the public hearing. This is public hearing for item number 1. We do have people who signed up. I will call them in order. Mitchell Chargo, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of Kappa Housing Corporation. Representative was too ill to be here today. Kappa Housing Corporation owns 2 of the properties on 5th Street Northeast, 928 Fifth Street Southeast and 916 5th Street Southeast. And these are on the south side of 5th Street Southeast. And my primary purpose here today is to lodge and register the objections to the plan of reconfiguring the segment or the section of 5th Street Southeast into a one-way that I believe is heading straight into Dinkytown East. We have a driveway, or my client has a driveway on both of those properties, which is approximately 140 feet right off of 10th Street, which will now require traffic to go 3 blocks out of the way to access the property in order to accommodate this reconfiguration of 5th Street Southeast. And just as a matter of history, I understand that this is the second time that the city has proposed changing this section of 5th Street Southeast from a 2-way street to an eastbound 1-way. Same thing was proposed about 30 to 35 years ago when the city rebuilt 5th Street Southeast from Central Avenue to 14th Avenue Southeast and converted it from a 2-way street to an eastbound 1-way. That's what they tried to accomplish. But for several of the same reasons that I'd like to register below, or what I'm going to say below here, we're opposing changing our section, again, just like we did back 30, 35 years ago, and the city determined not to make the change at that time. So let me outline for you just the basic reasons that we're opposing turning this section of 5th Street Southeast into a one-way. And it would seem like it would be a trivial matter, but it's not. First, as I've already mentioned, the drivers are going to be required to drive an extra 3 blocks all the way around the other way towards 6th Street just to access our driveway. And while I'm not here to speak on behalf of the property across the street, I understand they're going to have the same issue. By making 5th Street a one-way, the volume of automobile and bicycle traffic, which has coexisted for quite some time, is not going to change appreciably. Instead, what we think is going to happen is changing the one-way traffic is actually going to encourage drivers who are driving on the one-way street to drive faster, less safely, because there's nothing to be on the lookout for except for the 2-way traffic for the bikes. And as I've mentioned, the automobiles and bikes have shared this section of 5th Street Southeast for more than 40 years since the existing pedestrian bridge was first installed. And my client's not aware of any collisions whatsoever. We don't understand or see the reason why they can't continue doing so. One of the other concerns that we have is that the short distance from our driveway on 5th Street to the access point on 10th Street is actually going to encourage people to turn left, going the wrong way down a one-way to access our driveway. Perhaps the driveway is across the street from us. I think as well that visitors to the property who are not familiar with the area are going to have a devil of a time trying to access this property. And in our estimation, what we'd like to see happen is a consideration of making the one-way, the other direction, less objectionable. In particular, if do you want to make the one-way going around the other way and coming back up the frontage road on 6th? It would seem to make the most sense because most traffic is going to be accessing our properties from 10th Street. In addition, I think that I understand the propriety of having a pedestrian bridge which will allow for emergency access vehicles to access and cross 35W. But we think that making 5th Street southeast and eastbound one way will decrease the safety of our members. When I say members, the property owners and the visitors in the event of a police, fire, or medical emergency. Unless law enforcement emergencies are going to turn the wrong way down a one way as well to access our property. And the last thing I'd like to say is that the change, it may constitute a partial taking and a reduction in its value for which my client should be compensated. And at this point, if this project proceeds, we're going to be evaluating options to look at the possibility of commencing some sort of action to protect our interests. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can provide the clerk with your testimony for the record too, if you want.
Pardon me?
You can provide your testimony to the clerk for the record if you wish.
Good.
Thank you. Next up will be Chris Lauenschlager. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Chair Reich and council members. My name is Chris Lautenschlager. I'm the executive director of the Marcy Homes Neighborhood Association at 500 8th Avenue Southeast. Just wanted to make a few comments that my board has asked me to submit here today. The replacement of the 5th Street Southeast pedestrian bike bridge is a significant project for the Marcy Homes neighborhood and the city, as we have appreciated being involved in discussions regarding its basic structure and location. We consider the bridge to not only be an important literal connection between the east and west sides of our neighborhood, but also a significant gateway to the university, the historic district, and to and from the Mississippi. For more than 3 years, we've listed our priorities to MnDOT and the city regarding this project. These priorities came out of a robust community engagement process led by our Transportation and Creative Places committees, and from surveys we've conducted of bridge users. One of the priorities on which our neighbors were nearly unanimous was that the bridge needs to be visible with the 5th Street Southeast right-of-way. To retain the visible effect of the street grid, to ensure people unfamiliar with the neighborhood can easily see the bridge, and to ensure that a structure can be seen from within the neighborhood. Also among a list of priorities are reconstructing the bridge so that it serves as an icon of the neighborhood with a distinct aesthetic, is visible at night, and engages local artists in any design or ornamentation. Marcy Homes expresses its gratitude for engaging with neighbors on this project. This bridge is the most trafficked in the state and of significant importance to the community in which it resides. Its impact will be profound. Now we look forward to the next steps, which will elevate this structure in a way that will honor the expressed desires that we have found in our community engagement process. Up until this point, Marcy Homes has only been allowed to engage with this process for more or less a utilitarian standpoint. From our perspective, the successful redesign of this bridge, which is a board priority and is included in our 2014 master plan, is one that ensures the new bridge contributes more than simply being a functional and safe transitway, is one that increases the visibility of the arts and creative interventions in public infrastructure projects, and is one that engages artists in shaping places and activities. We look forward to working with the city, MnDOT, and other stakeholders to help make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. I have someone who signed in, but perhaps on the wrong sheet. Lawrence Weisberg, were you to speak on this subject or the subsequent one? I suspected as much, given your address. So anyone else wish to come forward for this project, the pedestrian bridge in question? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. If staff could make maybe a comment on, obviously the bridge is very well received, but some questions were raised in terms of the context of traffic flow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The fellow that spoke a few moments ago talked about the inconveniences of going out of the way to access a private driveway, and that is a consequence of this project. But our job is to provide public access. And the distance in which accessing that driveway, while it's convenient, being 150 feet or so from 10th Avenue, yes, they will have to go around the block to access the driveway, which serves about 14 14 parking stalls. The challenge here is how do you design something that works for the majority of folks that are using the corridor? Right now, we've got 2,000 pedestrians and bicycles per day that use this bridge, and the way the existing bridge is configured, it spits bikers out into the sidewalk. This bridge will shift to the north, it will encourage bike riding in the street, and it will encourage pedestrians, of course, to use the sidewalks on both sides. There'll be a new pedestrian crossing at the curb. So to address the concerns of the constituent that was here, the man that was representing the constituent, we looked at a number of different options, but we were not able to find a solution that worked for him. We looked at parking removal. We looked at making this continuing a two-way situation here, which would require folks to turn around in the driveway. And if they didn't turn around in the driveway, you'd have vehicles making a blind curve head-on with oncoming traffic, which is not a safe maneuver. But one of the things that this project will do is extend the reversible bike lane to the bridge, and we see a lot of benefit to that. So is there an inconvenience? Yes. But we are providing access to that constituent, and we are providing a safer, better facility for the thousands of people that use that bridge every year. There are always trade-offs in these projects, and unfortunately, there's going to be some inconvenience to the constituent.
Thanks for clarifying that broader context. Councilmember Fletcher.
I have one more follow-up question on that. Thank you. Did you explore, as they requested, making the one-way the other direction coming from 10th?
Great question. Thank you. Councilmember, we did. The challenge with making a one-way in the other direction is with that reversible bike lane. It makes a very awkward situation where you've got opposing traffic basically going you'd have traffic going with the bike facility, but that's not the consistent cross-section that we've got elsewhere in the corridor. And it would present challenges for folks that want to go eastbound. So while it would make things very easy to go with traffic westbound, there's a lot of challenges with, we would have to add a bike lane, which we don't have room for out here. So there are some operational problems with the bike lane, with the reversible bike lane. We're trying to keep the cross-section consistent here. So that's why the opposing direction doesn't work as far as we've evaluated. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note that this project, as well as the others on our public hearing agenda today, are here for their assessment hearings, but I believe all of the layouts have been approved by the council last term. So it's common and I think appropriate for folks to come about the assessments and ask questions about the layout and the decisions that were made last term. I think on the next one, I maybe even voted against the layout that came forward, but just wanted to just sort of just highlight where we are in the process. And I don't know if staff wanted to comment on that at all, but thanks, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you. That's good clarification. So with that, no further comments or questions. I will move approval of the item before us as submitted. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries. And we will move on to item 2, which is the Penn Avenue North, Lowry Avenue North to Broadway Avenue Street Reconstruction Project, project approval, assessment, and areaway abandonment. And I believe we have Mr. Flom again.
Good morning once again. This is the Penn Avenue North Reconstruction Project, which many of you have seen in the past. Basically, this is a reconstruction project from Lowry Avenue to West Broadway. Some background, just to refresh your memory. This is a community works-led initiative. Discussions began back in 2014 to improve the corridor as a whole from basically Glenwood all the way up to 44th. There were a number of projects and initiatives that came out of that process that are in the 5-year program. For this particular segment, the reconstruction segment, the concept was approved by the City Council back in August of 15, and layout was approved last March. Over the last year, we've been working on a final design, and there is a final plan that has been signed and approved by both the city and the county. So just to make it very clear to the folks that are here, We are talking about a total reconstruction, new sidewalks, pedestrian ramps, new asphalt roadway surface, concrete curb and gutter, stormwater inlets, lighting, and trees. So it's the entire road that will be reconstructed. And this is a cross-section of what the product will look like. And this is the concept layout that was approved by the City Council a couple of years ago. So essentially, going from the outside in, you've got 2 sidewalks with boulevards. There will be trees in the boulevards, 2 parking lanes, and 2 drive lanes. And as many of you recall, this was a controversial discussion. There were 2 concepts that were debated. This is the one that ultimately moved forward. And in the process of final design, we brought forth a layout which the council approved back in 2017. This is a sample of the West Broadway intersection. So a lot of folks have been asking, well, how does the C-Line factor into this project? Well, it's a collaborative initiative with Metro Transit, and it is part of a bigger package. This project was put into the same bid package as the reconstruction project, but the funding buckets are kept separate. So it's very important that we note that. We have a $13 million project, Hennepin County's kicking in some money, the city's kicking in some money, Metro Transit's kicking in some money. They all come from different funding sources, and we're keeping the BRT separate in terms of how it's being paid for, but it was bid out for efficiencies in construction. So there's a little bit of confusion there. Are they the same project? Well, they were bid out together, but they are independent projects with independent funding sources. As part of that $13 million initiative, the city is required to contribute a match, and our match is $2.5 million. Through the uniform assessment policy, we're able to collect $674,000. That doesn't get us to the $2.5 million, so we're using net debt bonds to come up with the gap. We use the influence area method when calculating assessments. This year it's 87 cents per square foot for a residential property, $2.60 for a non-residential property. We calculate an influence zone. There are different payment methods. You can either pay it at once or over a 20-year period. It starts in the 2019 rolls. We do have Suzette here to answer specific questions if folks do have them. Here's a basic graphic on how the influence area is calculated. You may have seen this before. Some of you may have not. This is something that Suzette can help you understand if you're trying to figure out how your assessment was calculated. And here's an example of the project and how we looked at 2 sample blocks here with both a commercial and a residential rate applied. So next steps, the project will be under construction this construction season. This is one of the final steps in the process, which is basically lining up the funding to allow for this project to proceed. So with that said, questions?
Are there any questions for the project and presentation? Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When this layout was approved, this was a corridor that's on the bike master plan. It was approved without bicycle lanes, and the intention was then to build a facility on a parallel corridor. Is that project moving forward? Is it funded? Do you know the status of the bike facility?
Councilmember Bender, Mr. Chair, the Queen Avenue Bike Boulevard project was submitted for federal funding, and we were successful in getting that funding. So you will see that in the 5-year CIP. I'm managing that project. We will start the community engagement process later this year. We're in the process of hiring a consultant right now.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing for item 2, Penn Avenue North project. Anyone sign in? Anyone wish to come forward? Anyone wish to come forward? Seeing no takers, I will close the public hearing and move the item before us as submitted with the actions required to proceed. Any further conversation from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries, and we can now go to public hearing number 3, the Hennepin Avenue South, Lake Street to West 36th Street reconstruction project. And again, this is for project approval, assessment, and areaway abandonment. Director Hutchinson.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Deborah Jacobs with Transportation Engineering and Design will provide information about the assessment leading into this public hearing.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I'm presenting on Hennepin Avenue South between Lake Street and West 36th Street. The proposed project entails sidewalk, planted boulevards, and other amenities for pedestrians, bicycles, removing the roadway and replacing it, and making other utility improvements. The cost of the project is approximately $7.7 million. Part of that funding is assessments of approximately $1.025 million, roughly 13% of the total cost. Staff has conducted numerous outreach events in preparation for its layout, which was approved on June 30th of 2017. In advance of today's public hearing, staff hosted 2 pre-assessment forums, one at the evening of February 21st and one the morning of February 22nd. Approximately 10 people attended each. We would appreciate this committee and the full council approving all of the resolutions attached to this letter, and I am available, as are other staff members, for any questions concerning this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or clarifications per the presentation? Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wondered if yourself or the director could describe a little bit what's happened since the layout in June. I know there's been a lot of additional community engagement that happened after the layout came through council. Prior to that, there were 3 public meetings and a lot of one-on-one meetings with the business community, but now I know staff has gone back out over the summer and fall to just revisit that decision, to look at it again. Could you just talk about that? I'm sure folks will talk about that during the public hearing portion. But
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, this was addressed to both Deborah and myself, and I will take an opportunity to speak to it. As with many of our projects, our public engagement process yielded a variety of different opinions, some of them related to smaller portions of the project, others related to the entire project. When we brought the layout for approval, and when it was unanimously approved by this committee, you also requested that we continue to work together with the community. We took that very seriously and re-engaged through a series of meetings with, in particular, the business community and property owners that are between Lake Street and 31st Street. I know my team has had a number of one-on-one sit-down meetings to understand concerns. I also asked my team to review the layout, just make sure there isn't something that we missed or something that we would bring back to you or decide to do differently. That was a couple of month process. We concluded that process and communicated back with the people that were so kind to lend more of their time to us through the fall for discussion. And today we are not reintroducing the layout. We are asking to continue the process on the assessment.
Thank you. Any further questions or clarifications? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing. This is public hearing number 3, Hennepin Avenue South Reconstruction Project. I have people who've signed in. I'll go through them in order, starting with Ruth Weisberg. If you can come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Good morning.
Morning.
Ruth Weisberg. I have been at a number of meetings, but was not invited to the one. I did not get a notice on the one where the council actually voted initially. And that was too bad because we have a real issue regarding handicaps. This project is based on observations, not studies, and is flawed. It's totally unfair to the disabled, handicapped, cognitively impaired, and debilitated, also retailers, who rely on parking. It is not compliant to eliminate all parking and accessibility. There's not even a mid-block drop-off. My son dropped me off here. Not only was there a special drop-off, the sidewalk was slanted, so it was easy for me to walk up. This would indicate that there isn't a lot of common sense and thought that was put into that, to not even have a drop-off.
people will inevitably stop and create hazardous driving conditions. Yesterday, we were uptown, and there was a car that literally made a U-turn. I've seen that before, to get a meter, which are all going to be eliminated between 30 and 31st. That's where all your retail and other specialty stores are located. They rely on parking, in addition to the fact that the handicapped are being discriminated against, literally. They're saying, please don't come here. The millennials have come, and therefore, we don't have to make any kind of accommodations to you. Many thoroughfares no longer function efficiently due to loss of lanes for bikers. There are so few bikes. An observation which was sent to us by Simon said there's 200 bikes and 10,600 cars at different times of the day. No study, just an observation. I do think you need studies before you change a road from 100% to 50%. That has worked over the many years. To eliminate all your parking and drop-offs is a flagrant discrimination to the elderly. It's like saying, don't come. And it's obviously the council is favoring millennials at the expense of the cognitively impaired, the handicapped, and the disabled. This cannot and should not occur. It is sad and detrimental to our city's image. I don't know where the accountability went. You need to revisit this discrimination and noncompliance and make it more accessible to all. Uptown is a diverse area and should continue to be diverse. The questions I would like to ask are, was this plan presented to the whole neighborhood? I'm actually, it's rhetorical because I spoke with my friend whose daughter lives there and said her whole apartment building, which is right on the lake, and I can't remember the street, clearly said they were not notified at all that anything was going on in the road in Uptown.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, Uptown is suffering anyway with the Amazons of the world. The retail doesn't need to be hurt, it needs to be helped. And I understand that sidewalks need to be replaced, and it would be nice to have beauty, but not at the expense of all the people, the handicapped, and all the retailers who really help support that area.
Ma'am, if you can conclude.
I will conclude with the question, how and when was the ADA given information? What information did the ADA receive? And again, hopefully you will revisit this whole parking change that is extremely discriminatory to those who are disabled.
Thank you for your comments. I will call for the next person who signed in. And just to note that if comments have already been made, you can say I concur, so we don't have duplication of comments, but we have noted the comments made so far. The next one is also Weisberg. I can't quite make out. Andrea, thank you. Name and address for the record. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this meeting. I know a tentative decision has been made to eliminate parking and add bike lanes on Hennepin Avenue in Uptown. Before the bulldozers begin, I would like to lay out some facts that you may not have heard before. Simon Valensky, a transportation planner for the city, sent us a study that was used to support the idea of eliminating parking and adding bike lanes on Hennepin Avenue. The city's transportation planners interpret the study as showing that there were lots of bicycle riders through Hennepin Avenue and not very much demand for parking. In reality, though, regarding the demand for car parking, the study looked at 6 different time intervals during the day. However, 3 of the 6 times were not during retail hours, 6 a.m., 9 a.m., and 9 p.m. So obviously, the study was set up to show there would be very little demand for parking in Uptown. And it still showed there'd be a high demand for parking anyway. Furthermore, the study counted 10,600 cars, many with multiple passengers, and only 200 bikes. Does 200 bikes compared to 10,600 cars sound like a lot of bikers, as the city planner has suggested? Does it make any sense to penalize the people in 10,600 cars to satisfy 200 bikers? It would be a huge mistake to get rid of all the parking on Hennepin. At a minimum, can't there at least be parking on one side of the street? Then there could be bike lanes on the other side. I would like this situation looked at again. On Hennepin Avenue, according to Simon's study, there are at least 55 times more people in cars compared to bikes. That's less than 2% for bikes. And in the winter, bikes are almost non-existent. Retail will greatly suffer and the tax base will dramatically decrease. We currently cannot rent our uptown building because future tenants know that what's going to be happening. There will soon be a street full of empty storefronts on Hennepin Avenue. And this will not be bad. This will be bad for the city's tax revenue, but also for uptown residents who will no longer be living in a vibrant, fun neighborhood. People like my mother-in-law and father will no longer be able to shop in uptown. I am very sad. My dad is not going to be able to go there anymore. There's nowhere to drop him off. There's nowhere you have to actually take him. So there's nowhere any of those people can come. They do not have the strength to walk multiple blocks to get to the activity. I am hoping you will look at this parking issue again with an open mind and not act like our national government is acting today. I think there could be a compromise with parking on one side, the west side of the street, and bike lanes on the other side. Thank you, and I hope that you will look at this again.
Thank you for your comments. Just to note, the emphasis of today's conversation is on the assessments, but we will take comments to the overall context as it's an open hearing. So next we have Wayne Johnson. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
I'm Wayne Johnson, owner of the building at 3040 Hennepin Avenue. First floor is retail, second floor is apartments. I concur with both the previous people that spoke. The primary issue to me is, from a bike perspective, we have many bikers live in the second floor. They have no interest in having a bike lane on Hennepin Avenue. Their primary purpose in using their bike is to go to the Greenway and go either east or west. And Hennepin Avenue makes it very difficult. They go to Holmes or Humboldt Avenue, a direct shot to the Greenway, and it makes it much more easy to get to the bike lanes. And though that street goes all the way through from the Greenway all the way to 36th Street, so there is no benefit from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving down the list, Amy Kaler, please come forward, state your name and address the record.
Amy Kaler. I pretty much concur with everything that's been said. Just briefly, I'm a millennial, so it's like a little different. I do tend to agree with the idea. I work at Amazing Thailand, 3024 Hennepin Avenue. We do a quite large to-go and delivery business with multiple delivery companies, and I just foresee them not changing their stopping right in front of our restaurant, and I don't want that to cause problems. So that's sort of where I'm at. Thanks.
Moving down the list, we have Lawrence Weisberg. Please come forward, name and address for the record.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. I do concur with the past speakers, so I won't cover the issues about the disabled. But I do want to say the fact that the road there, Hennepin Avenue, it's been about 120 or so years the same size. And now it's going to be reduced by 50%. So that's a dramatic, fundamental change in the road. So it's something that can't be just can't be corrected easily if the decision perhaps may be wrong. So that's why I believe in more studies and thought. Even though it has already been passed, I believe that before it's done, it should be reconsidered. It kind of brings to mind the Nicollet Avenue with Kmart in the middle of it. That I'm not obviously in the middle 1970s. I wasn't there. I don't think many people here were there. Somehow it got done, and now you've got Kmart in the middle of Nicollet. And I think we all know that that's a big problem for Minneapolis. So before something along those type of lines of major reconstruction of this street happens, let's really, really think about why we're reducing the street by 50%. That's just fundamentally major construction difference. It's not adding bike lanes. It's a complete different size of a major roadway. So that's why I think it's okay to possibly reopen that, because I heard there has been a lot of talk already about how it passed. That's why I think that it might be okay to reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I don't have anyone else who's signed up. Hennepin Avenue. Jeff Herman, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Jeff Herman, and I own 2 properties along the stretch from 30th to 31st. And first, I would like to thank Councilmember Bender and all of our staff for all the time that they put into this. And I know it's been very controversial, and I think they went over and above in hearing the property owners and hearing businesses. And I want to say that I'm appreciative of that. I know this is a meeting to talk about assessments. And this may seem a little bit unconventional, but the property owners along the stretch from 30th to 31st, I think, are going to be paying the lion's share of the assessments for that improvement. And I can tell you that the majority of those property owners are very much against the parking being removed. But at this point, I think the decision has been made to move forward with that. And so what I want to ask you is a consideration. I know this may be a little unconventional, that you increase the assessment by 30% to pay for the landscaping along the side of those two sidewalk areas, and to equally assess, say this correctly, to assess proportionately those improvements along your entire district, and not just along the stretch from 30th to 31st. And I think that's a fair request, and a lot of what has been said throughout these meetings is that this is a community improvement, and the property owners are very much against this, the businesses are against this. And so if that's the case and it is a community improvement, I think it should be, the assessment should be throughout the entire district. And again, I know this is a little bit unconventional, but right now the property owners do not want to pay extra money to landscape those areas. And I think when the improvements are done, you're going to have a stretch on both sides that's going to be pretty empty, in my opinion, and both in the Special Service District, which I'm also a part of, I think is in consensus that the improvements should be made to both of those sides of the street. The landscaping improvements should be made, but it should be assessed equally throughout your entire district. Thank you.
Thank you. Have no one else signed in? Does anyone else wish to come forward? Anyone else wish to come forward and give testimony? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and say I think this is the first time I've ever heard a request for an increased assessment. And it was good to make the link between grieving the layout and therefore grieving the assessment. You don't want to pay for what you don't like. So thanks for making that logical connection. Might not have been apparent in the other testimony. However, we do have a uniform assessment process, which goes both ways. Most people want less, but for those who want more, I think it still applies, and perhaps the director can comment on that. Or call someone forward.
Mr. Chair, I would like an opportunity to consult with our attorney and others on the assessment process as it relates to increasing. That is also a new one for me here, and I want to make sure that I have a good and correct and appropriate response to you, so please allow me to look into what the opportunities are surrounding that.
Thank you. You should make comment on our uniform assessment process and how it might apply to this unique request for more.
Mr. Chair, committee members, I'm not sure the director meant right now, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have about increasing assessments. As a technical matter, one thing to keep in mind is if we increase the dollar amount of assessments in a project at this stage, we would have to go back and renotice. We'd have to provide notices with the amount that we actually intend to assess. We can always decrease without renoticing, but not increase. Something to be aware of.
And The assessment, of course, is dictated by our formula and the influence zones as prescribed for the area.
Correct. My understanding of this project is we applied the city standard process, which is to factor the uniform assessment rate and the size of the parcel that is benefited by the improvement.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, I might add too that I believe I understand the intent of the request. And I think in the spirit of the request, we can start to explore available options.
Very good. And it seems like there's other factors that other streets might not have, including an improvement district, an active community and business association. I mean, there's just a lot of elements to play with outside of the confines of our assessment process. So I think that's been opened up and will be pursued subsequently. Any further conversation, Council President Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to just, I don't want to belabor this with my colleagues here, but I did want to just have the opportunity to highlight a couple of the really important questions that folks asked during the public testimony and just get the response from staff, because there have just been so many hours worth of staff time and engineering time spent looking through all of these details. So there was a question which we'd heard in the past about accessibility for folks who are being dropped off, either because of physical disabilities or maybe even Lyft or Uber. So that I know staff has taken that into consideration, and it would be helpful to know that information. And I think that would also include the sort of delivery drop-off question. I wanted to clarify, there were a couple of comments about bike lanes, and I did want to just clarify the reason in particular on this block between Lake and 31st for the parking removal. I think even if we removed the bike lanes for that block, you would have to significantly reduce the pedestrian space and amenities in order to leave parking in. So I just wanted staff to be able to clarify that, those design specifics. And then I did also want to note, again, as I did before, that so there's a little bit of a difference between this first block between Lake and 31st and then the rest of the corridor. For this first block, staff has proposed adding bus bump outs at the corners, as well as a pretty significantly wide mid-block crossing that would come from where Calhoun Square has its door over across to where Penzi Spice is about on the block. There's hundreds of people crossing there every day. And given those constraints, the number of parking spaces that could have been put back in was actually very limited. Staff did go back and meet with every business owner again after the layout approval and looked at ways that we might be able to add more parking spaces back in. I think there, with, again, the reduction of pedestrian space, there could have been maybe like 7 spaces added. So when staff looked at that, plus the, the kind of pros and cons, they continued with their original recommendation. So I can let staff get into those engineering details. I am not an engineer. I am merely a council member, but I wanted to highlight a couple of those pieces from the public testimony and ask staff to respond.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, I'd like to have Jenny Hager, the Director of Transportation Planning and Programming, come up to answer some of the more specific questions that have come up today. Jenny.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm Jennifer Hager. I'm the Director of Transportation Planning and Programming. Happy to be here with you today to help describe some of the complexities of this project. I, along with Simon Blensky, who is the planner on this project, have been participating in many of the one-on-one conversations with the property and business owners, especially on the block between Lake and 31st Street, where you've heard much of the concerns and questions expressed today. I just want to start by saying that the layout that we did bring forward last year and that the City Council did approve does meet and is consistent with our city policies and goals related to pedestrians. In all of our conversations with the initial community engagement and all of the follow-up conversations, there was one area of major agreement and consensus that we found, and that is that the pedestrian experience along this block needs improvement and is wanted. So our design reflects that. It widens out the pedestrian realm. It provides the mid-block, crosswalk that so many people are already using informally today. Just consult my notes here. Councilmember Bender, as you referenced, we did do some evaluation based on the conversations that we had with the property owners. We did look at options for putting some parking back on this block. And what we found is that just to get a few parking spots back, it came at the expense of the much agreed upon pedestrian space. Therefore, we're not recommending any changes. We are not recommending putting any parking back here. The current design that's out there has served this block well for the past 30 to 50 years. And the design that we're recommending, we feel is going to continue to serve this block well for the next 30 to 50 years, which are going to look very different than the past.
Councilmember Bender, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then I just wanted to maybe give a little more explanation to this question that was raised by the last speaker, which was, part of why we went back and revisited the design was because the business community has told us that, because of their concerns over this block, they're less interested in investing further in the block through the special service district and all of the sort of voluntary financial commitments that have been made by the business community to greenery and those kinds of things. And so I think the question here is, can we take a different approach to funding things like the greenery? So I know that that's what the director and staff maybe need to consider even past this meeting today, and we would have time if we wanted to make a change either before council, or if we decided to postpone it, we could do that before our council meeting next Friday. So I don't know if there's more.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, I would not recommend postponing. We have federal funding in this project. We took extra time through the fall and delayed already coming back to you, and have put ourselves kind of right up against that schedule for being able to capitalize on that federal funding and move forward with the project. That being said, I do believe that you could move forward today, and still we could be sensitive to what we've heard from those who have testified today, continuing to look for solutions that will work for residents and business owners, as well as, in the spirit of Mr. Herman's testimony, continue to look for partnering solutions. But I would recommend that you move forward today in order to secure our federal funding and be able to reconstruct the street.
Okay, anything further? Okay, any other questions? Councilmember Gordon.
I guess I just mostly want to make a comment. Something I heard in the testimony resonated with me, and I think it's come up in other areas of the city. And it mostly has to do with accommodating people who are more dependent on motor vehicles for their transportation in terms of getting access to the businesses or the services that they might want. And we've seen other areas where we haven't left any room when it's come to the bike lanes and traffic lanes for the drop-off pickups that people might need. And I think it's and then we heard a little even for takeout out and delivery, which is more of a commercial function and isn't having to do with people with handicaps or disabilities. But I just think it's a bigger question that we've got to keep working on. I don't know what the solution is. It might even be with even this design. There could be some accommodations made somewhere on the blocks within businesses or drop-off points. I just think it's critically important that we solve the problem first because it's the right thing to do, but I also think it has the potential to undermine a lot of our other efforts to make sure that we have safe, accessible transportation means for all modes. I'm not advocating delaying this project at all, but I'm advocating that we keep studying that problem as this moves forward for this block. It seems like there's one particular block in question, but for the stretch, but also so we're in our designs of other areas and other projects as we keep moving forward, we remember this issue.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions per the presentation and the item before us? Seeing none, I will move the item as submitted, noting there is some subsequent work that is outside of the project as presented. All in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries. We can now move to item 4, which is the 61st Street West, Lyndale Avenue South to Nicollet Avenue South Street Reconstruction Project. And this was also a project approval, assessment, areaway abandonment, and appropriation increase as listed.
Mr. Chair, our third public hearing today will be kicked off by Bev Warmka with Transportation Engineering and Design.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I am Beverly Warmka, the project engineer with Transportation Engineering and Design Division of Public Works. Today, I'm here presenting for the public hearing for 61st Street Reconstruction, City Project 2288, CPV 103. This proposed project consists of reconstructing 61st Street from Lyndale Avenue to Nicollet Avenue, and elements to be part of the proposed project includes the full removal of the existing roadway, new sidewalk on both sides of 61st, new pedestrian ramps, new pavement, curb gutter utility improvements. Will also include some planted boulevards with trees, new signage, and pavement markings out there. The total cost of the project is estimated at $5.9 million, of which approximately 20% or $1.148 million comes from special assessments. The remaining, and those assessments were determined using the 2018 Uniform Assessment Rate and the Influence Zone Area Method. Rates of $2.60 a square foot of non-residential properties and 87 cents a square foot for the residential properties. As typical with the reconstruction projects, these assessments are payable over a 20-year period. The remaining funding sources on this project are cash transfers, MSA money, and stormwater revenue. We have had numerous meetings throughout the course of the project with property owners and the neighborhood. We also had a meeting last week to discuss the pre-assessment, which we had 2 people attending that meeting. Today, Public Works is asking City Council to pass the resolutions ordering the work to proceed, adopting the special assessments, authorizing the sale of the assessment bonds, authoring the abandonment and removal of areaways in conflict with the project. This concludes my presentation, and I'll be available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions per the presentation? Councilmember Gordon, is that a leftover? No? Oh, see none. I will open the public hearing. We do have someone who signed in. Pete Pesco, come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. How are you today? Oh, it's a little loud. Sorry. I was unable to attend any of the prior meetings, but our street, I've been on 61st forever. It's we're a smaller construction company there. Between the streets right there on Nicollet and Lyndale, there's a monster. Mini Gasco takes up a good chunk of it, along with a concrete plant that takes up a good chunk of it. It's a very industrial street. One big apartment on the end there by Nicollet on the south side, but other than that, it's an industrial street, and it's other than the big businesses there's just a few of us smaller ones, a small machinery repair shop, a small cabinet building shop, but then out of our lot we have more storage than a functional business. And from discussing with some of the other smaller, again, when I refer back to some of the many meetings and so on, there's only a few smaller business owners there, less than one hand, and who I've spoken to that were unfortunately unable to make it today. But so there's not a lot of voices amongst us, I guess, with what's happening here. And so the assessment value, number one, is shocking to us smaller business owners. I mean, we're still picking ourselves up off of the street, trying to figure out how we're even going to be able to put it, since a good chunk of our lot is storage, how we're going to be able to, $120,000 assessment for a smaller construction company and a small machinery shop for each of us is quite a bit. To even with over the 20 years, it's hard to try to, put together. But then the street, being that it's an industrial street and it has been destroyed. I've been on the street, whether working at the construction company or working late at night, seeing what the activity on the street is. It is an industrial street, and it's destroyed, but it's destroyed from the concrete trucks that come through there. In the current plan is to replace with asphalt again, where it's going to get destroyed again. And every spring through the freeze thaw, you guys know with road restrictions and everything like that, what happens. But the concrete company, they make their concrete out there. They come right on the roads, and it just gets, it's a minefield out there every spring. And replacing it with asphalt is, to me, considered a waste. Our construction company is a concrete, masonry, so we're involved with this types of stuff every day. And to see it go back in with asphalt, it's just going to get destroyed again. And I don't see what the purpose, I guess, really is of 4.6, 5.5 million, whatever it might be. It's I don't know. That's all I guess I'd really have to say about it. I guess is those, the assessment part, and then also the functionality of replacing with asphalt just to get it destroyed again through the concrete company, or the concrete trucks. So that's all I had to say, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Appreciate the time.
We have no one else signed in. Anyone else wish to come forward and make comment? Anyone wish to come forward? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And in terms of the assessment around the material being used, that comes up often, and I know there's more than several factors actually come into play as to what's the appropriate material and livelihood of that material selection. If there could be comment on how you analyze this particular area.
Thank you, Chair. Right now, we have a plan for this street to go in as asphalt. However, we also have an alternate for concrete. So when we get this project out for bid and we review the bids, then we can add that factor in as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it has not been fully finalized that it's an asphalt street.
And the intention of either option would be based on a longevity.
Longevity, the cost to both install and maintain.
Very good. And if there are any other questions in terms of impact and assessment, particular to your smaller business, we have people who can answer those questions individually. Any further questions per what we presented? If not, I will move the item as submitted. All in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay. That carries. We now can go to our last public hearing and last item on our agenda. Item 5, the reappointment of Director of Public Works. And who's going to make the presentation here?
Mr. Chair, I'm pleased to be joined by Mayor Fry, who will speak to this item.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the members of the committee. I have put forward Ms. Hutchison's name to be the Director of Public Works. Obviously, she has served as the Director of Public Works for the last couple of years and has done so with, I think, exceptional integrity and a true forward-thinking vision. If and when you get to know Robin or Ms. Hutchison, you recognize a couple of things. First, she listens, and not just casually. I mean, she really intently listens, which is a concept that hasn't always been followed through with in our public works work historically. She's involved several different communities that have traditionally been left behind. Suddenly, now will have a voice in the process and have had a voice in the process. And she also took the time to tour respective wards with each individual council members. And I think that's really an important piece because some of these micro issues often get overlooked. But I can tell you that Ms. Hutchison has been involved with them at a very consistent and almost incessant level, which is helpful in the city. Not to mention, I mean, the way she's done work to incorporate a forward-thinking vision and expand both pedestrian as well as bike infrastructure. She's been committed to leveraging public infrastructure investments to achieve multiple citywide goals and has championed the city's efforts to rethink our streets as places for everyone and as thoroughfares for all modes. This is a new way of thinking about things, and these items will inevitably get controversial. But there's no one that I think is better equipped to deal with that controversy and to continue along that forward-thinking path than Ms. Hutchison. I would strongly recommend her reappointment, and I fully ask for your support.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. And as this is a formal public hearing, I will open that public hearing to the public. Anyone wish to come forward? Anyone signed in? Anyone wish to come forward? Seeing no comment from the public, I will close the public hearing. Does any council member wish to make comment or have questions? Councilmember Gordon.
I just wanted to say that in the last few years, seeing that the Director of Public Works come in has been like a breath of fresh air. I think we've seen some enormous initiatives come forward. I think we've seen greater partnerships with other city departments as well as with policymakers. I'm excited about seeing how our complete streets policy is moving forward, the whole concept of Vision Zero, and looking at those things and tackling some of the bigger problems that face us. So I'm enthusiastically supporting it and can't wait to see what comes forward in the next few years. And based on what I know so far, my expectations are high, and I'm ready to partner to see if we can realize them all.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also wanted to just make a brief comment to enthusiastically support this nomination. I think I've been really excited to see the direction the Transit and Public Works is going. I think that there's a really strong commitment to deepening and improving, excuse me, community relationships and really doing more active listening. I think Mayor Fry is exactly right. So I just want to really emphasize, we had a community meeting in my ward a couple of weeks ago, and Director Hutchinson joined us, and it was a really vibrant conversation, and people were asking a whole range of issues, and I think really engaging in a different kind of conversation than what I've seen about how our city works and how our streets work. And I think it's just really exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would echo all that has been said, and I share everyone's perspective that the director has been very skilled at leading a department through a time of change. We had decades in our city where streets were designed mostly for cars to drive through our neighborhoods, and we are rethinking that, and it's challenging, and there are pros and cons, and each project takes a lot of time, and I know the director has been encouraging staff and herself has been getting into the weeds of public engagement and those important design details. There were a couple other things I wanted to note. The first is that I was part of the group of folks who got together to help choose our public works director when the previous director left the city. And I want to mention this because I think it's important about how we think about who we are putting in positions of leadership in our city. We recruited and ultimately chose, with the mayor's nomination, a director who had never been the director of a public works department before. She was an incredibly talented professional who had a lot of experience managing projects and staff. But if you just looked at the straight numbers, what size budget have you managed? What size staff have you managed? And have you done all of the specific things that a public works director does, which is oversee not only our transportation system, but our garbage and waste hauling, our recycling, our sewer system, our water system. If we had had those as criteria, we would have chosen Director Hutchison to lead our department, and that would have been such a huge loss for our city. And so I think it was important when we looked at what skills and responsibilities in the past that our candidate had, it was important to keep an open mind. And I think we have seen the benefits of that approach many, many times over with the exemplary leadership of Director Hutchison. The other thing I wanted to note that I think hasn't been said yet, which I'm sure everyone agrees, I've so appreciated the way our director supports our staff in the department. We have so many talented staff, from the folks who are on the front lines in our public works department doing the day-to-day maintenance of our water systems, of our road systems, all the way up through the many folks who we get to hear from often. And I know that the director took time to get to know her staff, all the way up and down through the department, to listen, to hear how things are done before sort of coming in and imposing any kind of her own thoughts. And I think that has shown itself to be a really sustainable way to lead a department through change. She's guiding her staff and relying on her staff's talents to make this transition in our city. And I think we see the benefit of that in all of the projects that staff is taking on. We are asking a lot from this department right now, and I know we're all really appreciative of everything that staff has been doing. So thank you, Director, for all of your leadership.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had one other brief item that I wanted to mention before the vote, which is that this is traditionally a department that does not get feedback unless it's negative. If it's whether you're plowing the snow or filling a pothole or making sure that when you turn the nozzle to your faucet that water comes out of it and goes to the right place. You don't get emails or phone calls saying, great job, things are working as they should be. But I do think things have been working as they should be, and I think Ms. Hutchison deserves a whole lot of credit for that. We have an extraordinary public works department as a whole, as Council President mentioned, from top to bottom, and by bottom I don't mean in terms of positional attitude, but in terms of they're literally at below the street, 100 feet, making sure that our city functions properly. And so, again, thank you for the time, council members. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor, excellent choice. Really, it's been a pleasure working with Robin. She's been so accessible, engaged on issues, responsive, open-minded to new ideas, focused on the basics, yet moving forward with a lot of the future work. And I'm very happy to support her reappointment. Look forward to working together in the years to come. I also wanted to really mention, that the mark of an excellent leader is reflected in their team. And the team that they surround themselves with, and even when they're coming in and those existing team members are there, the culture that they reinforce, the way that they work together and collaborate and communicate. And what I see out of Public Works is both an excellent team and all of the staff that I get to work with on all the many issues. And I think that's also a reflection of an excellent leader. And so it's exciting to see when that's all working so well together, and sets a really great example. And appreciate the whole Public Works family and especially our leadership. Thank you.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just didn't want to be the only one not to say a couple of nice words. Mr. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to continue our ability to work with Director Hutchison. Ms. Hutchison, I don't know what it's like to decide to move your whole life from Utah to Minneapolis and be welcomed with open arms by all kinds of crazy street arguments and discussions, and just be thrown into the middle of a lot of big work going on in our city. But I think what I have really found that I so value in this kind of Public Works department is your thoughtful and deliberate nature, and the quiet leadership that you provide. I see it also in your staff and in the energy that your staff brings to every single one of our community discussions. I see it in your patience and working with us as policymakers on helping us to make the right decision. And I see it in the public, and I see you engage with the public in difficult times and in every single way. So thank you for this nomination, and thank you for all your work.
Any further commentary? Well, I'm almost tempted to have some kind of contrarian notion here, but just to spice things up a bit. But that will not be forthcoming, unfortunately. But I will say, in summary, I think it's been said well and often and appropriately. Mr. Mayor, you're forwarding an excellent leader. We have someone who not only has respected the leadership that this multi-department. I mean, this isn't just. In many cities, as has been alluded to, would have these separated out and we have major departments in and of themselves. But together, I think we get great advantage if we can achieve the type of leadership that can helm something that coordinates these very interrelated physical departments together under one umbrella. That's an extraordinary effort. It's not something that can be done and should not be taken for granted, that it can be done easily. But it has been accomplished in these early years of having this director who stepped forward from Utah to come to Minneapolis to do this great work and take on this challenge. I think the notion that we have a department that has a culture of pride and excellence, that comes from the top all the way down, even to the inner chambers of our sewer system. We take pride in our work, and you can see it when you go to the mid-level managers where they have a breakfast and the foreman, you've been to that meeting. they take immense pride in what they do and feel connected to the overall purpose of what they do to create a healthy city, a vibrant city, an economically viable city. And that happens with the city that works in the public department that delivers those public goods. But it's been noted that we have a lot of ambitions moving forward, some aggressive plans to be a leader in so many ways. And even with council members' extraordinary ambitions, we have a department leadership that I think can keep up with them. But that's not the only thing that we see in our horizon, our own ambitions, our own goals. We have challenges that we don't even really know what they need in terms of what transportation and what cities and the built environment will look like in the future, be it autonomous vehicles, weather patterns that are increasingly blowing out the algorithms on what we need to do to have a safe and healthy delivery of water and management of it. I mean, these are things that are known unknowns, to borrow Mr. Rumsfeld's phraseology. To have someone who's forward-looking and is respected nationally to be a part of that conversation on the horizon, it's clearly we have the right leader at the right time. And so I'm happy to follow through on your recommendation, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your work. If there's no further conversation, I would suggest that we say aye if we approve the reappointment of Director Hutchinson to the Public Works Department. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting nay. That carries. And with that, we are adjourned.
We did, yeah.